From FinStrat CFO, it's the Keep Going podcast with your host, Joe Hamrahi.
All right. Hi again, everybody. This is Joe Hamrahi from FinStrat CFO. And today on our episode of Keep Going, we have Ron DeFeo. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer of American Airlines. Welcome, Ron. Thanks for being here. Obviously, we've known each other for a bit. Excited to have you on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hope you had a great new year and excited to be here.
So we're going to dive right in. I think we've talked over the several months about we're both on boards. We're talking about developing the next level of talent. Give us a little bit of a feel for how you got into this industry, how you went through your college days, what steered you in this direction.
Sure. So went to undergrad at DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, Division III athletics, small liberal arts school, and with the dream of being a journalist. They had just launched something called the Media Fellows program. They had a great newspaper. They had a brand new TV center. They had a great radio station, a small 2,000 person school, but with all this major league, the major league facilities. And not only that, they had a couple of great folks. They just had Ken Bodie, who'd stepped down from NBC, I believe, before he was go out to do Washington Week in Review. And he was running the program at the time. And eventually a guy named Dave Bomer, who was a cable exec, ran the program. And had Richard Roth, who went on to run the Medill School at Northwestern. And all these major league facilities, major league leaders, and it's awesome. And so did that and took one class in public relations my junior year and thought, this is interesting. Still, in the world of media, but on the different side. And thought, all right, let's explore this a little bit. Wound up doing an internship at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. We had a semester-long internship, and so did that and thought, wow, this is kind of fun. And so I thought, all right, let's do this. And wound up after school in Atlanta with an internship, and then wound up first full-time job at Ketchum Public Relations, where I was there for 4 years. Loved it. Always had the interest in thinking, should I go back to school? I love my liberal arts education. I recommend that to anyone. I opted out of every science and math class you could, and really working with Clorox for the last year and a half, dealing directly with brand managers. They were speaking a language I didn't understand.
Wow.
So I thought, you know what? This might be the time to do it. So went back to University of Georgia, go Dogs. Full-time in Athens, picked up MBA, and came out of school, got married, came out of school, and started working at Home Depot. And so was there for 8.5 years, grew up corporately at Home Depot. Unbelievable environment to really, if you learn the discipline of comms in an agency, you learn business at Home Depot. And was there for 8.5 years, and then had the opportunity to leave there and go take an officer role at Darden Restaurants. So I was there for 3.5 years. It was an eventful time, had a proxy fight when we were there, had a CEO transition, also a CEO transition at Home Depot, of course. And then after Darden got, things settled after that proxy battle, absolutely loved it there, but got a call to come to American over 10 years ago and thought, okay, let's test our mettle and get into the airline business. And sure enough, I've been here 10 years now.
Wow, that is some trajectory. Did you ever feel like you wanted to go back and write?
No, I will say I didn't. And we, in this day and age, right? It's. I mean, as you know, I'm sure you have other guests on here and the work you do with all of the firms. I mean, you're a writer full time all the time, and so we're in the world of content creation, and so you're able to fill that need through and the creative outlets and all the elements of journalism, which I respect and admire about truth telling into the bottom of the story and telling stories and presenting the news to your populations. They exist inside a company, different stakeholders, of course, but a lot of those truths kind of translate over, and so I was able to kind of fill that need that way.
Okay. And don't worry about the math and science part. That's why I have jobs.
There it is. That's right.
We all have to survive somehow.
That's right.
I'm just kidding. So In that, as you went through your career trajectory and you had hit all those different spots, I mean, what are some of the challenges? I mean, you talked a little bit about the changes in senior level executives. How did that impact you, and how did you like take it to the next level? Now you're an American over 10 plus years. You're doing lots of interesting things there. I mean, obviously you're entrenched with a lot of different people in a different environment. Like, would you say the early parts of your career frame that, and what some of the challenges that also helped you adjust to what you now deal with at American Airlines?
Sure. Well, what I loved about all these jobs is if you had an interest, you could work in it and get it done. So, at Ketchum, I was really able to learn, the importance and the skill set around media relations. So I loved media relations. And, at the time, and, media relations is obviously still critical. There's obviously, social media content creation, all the other different kind of stakeholder engagement tools we have today. But media relations was kind of the core. Okay. And I once had someone tell me, look, at the end of the day, they're either going to want, your clients can either want to get in the paper or stay out of the paper. And right. So that kind of, how do you get to the core of the work that you're doing is something that I learned early. And what I loved about working in an agency is bounce around from client to client, industry to industry, raise your hand and volunteer. And once you kind of carved out a niche, and for me, that was media relations, and specifically a lot of local media activations like market to market, getting up and calling the morning shows, and different spokespeople and traveling exhibits and things along those lines. You raise your hand, you're working on all sorts of different clients, not only in that office, but throughout the network. That was also the beauty of working at a large global firm. And you just get rich, just incredible experience. So I learned kind of how are you focusing on, really the core elements of the discipline, which for me, especially at that time, was media relations. Home Depot was really the business education. And I loved growing up inside of a corporation at Home Depot because it essentially, I started actually in what was the Eastern Division. So it was a divisional office doing communications and community affairs. And then moved into the store support center and all sorts of jobs there for the 8+ years I was there. But it was all about the stores at Home Depot, full stop. And so you learned early on, how is the work that we're doing supporting what's going on inside the store? And that sort of orientation, I think, is super critical.
Yeah.
And you're, dealing with district managers, store managers, regional vice presidents, merchants. Then you're working with, finance people, HR professionals. And so you're really trying to understand the work that they're doing and how is the work that I'm doing built to support what they're doing. So that was a key learning there. And that just, transition and same when you go to Darden restaurants, same, type of ethos as carries here. And of course, moved to an airline of 130,000 professionals here,
right?
Hubs across the country. We fly globally. Getting out and making sure you're out in the operation is critically important. But then also linking, of course, people that make the business go on the commercial side of the house, and of course the people team and finance team and everyone else that's supporting, the operation every day.
It's really interesting you said that. I was having the conversation with somebody today, and the parallels are so. It's so interesting to me that in whatever discipline you're in, and I had this conversation with some finance people today, it's about the business, right? And I think we're all in support of the business. And I think sometimes when you're doing the day-to-day task, whether you're in communications, whether you're in finance, whether you're in HR, whatever it is, you always have to keep in mind. And I think to me, the people that are most successful in this are understanding that they're in service of the business. And I think that gets lost a bit sometimes. You go to your job, and obviously there are different levels for everybody. But you go to your job and you finish a task, and it feels good to finish a task. But again, what are the questions you ask? How do you get ahead of the next problem? And those are things. I mean, you're in an industry that has all kinds of volatility, right? And I think for various reasons, out of your control, right? All kinds of different aspects of the government. The government shutdown affects you. I mean, all these kinds of interesting. How do you approach that from a proactive standpoint? In terms of how think about ahead.
I think a couple of things you talked about. First off, I agree with you. It's easy to fall. We talk about this on the team. We talked about this in all the teams I've been on. It's easy to fall in love with the discipline. You need to fall in love with the business.
Yeah.
Full stop. Because, and it's something that you pick up on being inside of a company. I mean, candidly, and you're all pulling in the same direction. And there was an old article pulled, gosh, years ago, and it was the old HR chief at GE when he relocated from the plant to the headquarters location, and he was out searching for a house, and he kept on talking to the real estate agent about that. He's like, "How close is this house to the plant? How close is this house to the plant?" And the real estate agent was like, "What plant?" But what he's referring to was, the place of work. And when he went and he met with, Jack Welch, Jack told him, "Don't ever lose that thought. Don't ever forget where the income comes in." And so I've always worked in organizations that have had large, frontline workforces. So part of their job too is how are you supporting that frontline team who in turn is taking care of the customer? So I think that's just kind of how you need to be built, to get things done. And then if you're grounded in the business and supporting the organization that way, you are naturally in lockstep with the business, thinking about what could come next. The things that you plan for, but then also all the scenarios, you're dreaming up. We, on the crisis issue side, we have a robust team, obviously, that handles a lot of, the issues and crises that happen here day to day. But we study things that not only happen in our industry, but other industries too, to try to get better and understand, boy, if this happened, what do we do? Or if someone else went through something, what are the learnings that we could pick up, and always make sure that we're trying to improve.
That's fantastic. And I think that's what separates, strong leadership as you see around the corner, see what's coming. And it's in every discipline again. It's come up to me, several people have mentioned to me your 8 truths. Can you go into a little bit about what they are, and then what problems were you trying to solve when you articulated those?
Yes, the 8 truths, famous. I wish they were famous. But so what, we did an employee survey, for the first time in many, many years, I'd say back in 2017 or 2018. And you got the results back, and you did listening sessions with the team afterwards. And it was great. It was informative, fabulous vehicle to hear all the things that are on people's mind and places to improve. But what struck me in the meeting, and it was the biggest lesson for me on setting expectations as a leader, because for every item or two that was completely valid, right? We need to do a better job of pausing to recognize, great wins and victories of the team. We need to do a better job of talking about open positions. We need to do a better job of talking about career pathing. There were also things along the lines of, wow, the business is always on. We often head down one path, but then we change direction and do something else. We changed the team to structure this way last year, and now we're changing again. And I thought to myself, I've done a poor job as a leader in setting expectations of what it's like to work on this team inside this company. And so we spelled out the 8 truths, and someone were like we said, we're in a 24/7 business. We're 24/7 organization supporting a 24/7 business. Situations will change on a dime. We're the conscience of the company. Our org structure will evolve as the business, evolves. We hadn't done anything to show people what success looks like and what it's like to work here. And so we rolled this out, and it got the kind of reviews you would think, some great, some bad. But it was an honest discussion about, this is how it is. There are some things we'd like to change, and we'll work on them. But also, these are the realities of the business and working here. And it was helpful, and it's helpful in the interview process. We still have people 8-10 years later that use that when talking about what it's like to work here. And we've evolved it some, put together kind of like an ethos sheet of this is what we're known for and this is what we stand for. But the 8 truths are a part of that, in just trying to, it's like a realistic job preview, put down into 8 points that it's a good guiding principles for our team.
But no, that's great. And I think what you hit on there too, and I what I've seen in my career, and I think we've seen it, all over the place, is that being transparent with people, they may not like it, they may be difficult, I used to tell people, you may not like me, but all I care about is that you respect me. But I have to earn your respect too. And being transparent is one of those ways. If people know it's expected of them, they're much better about it, even if they may not like it. And so I think the groundwork you lay there is important. And I think that for the next generation of leaders that come through, being honest to the staff, to the frontline workers, to the people that you're dealing with is crucial. And I think you hit on it in a way that's sort of like set up the structure of how your employees need to approach the business, which also leads me to the next point. You are truly a 24/7 business. I mean, I'm assuming that the work at Home Depot and Dart and other places was a lot, but it's not like this, right?
No. And don't get me wrong, they were hectic in their own way.
Sure.
But this is truly, there's always a fight in the air and always something going on.
Right.
And to come back to your earlier point, transparency and leadership, and hope we can touch on this a little bit.
Yeah.
That's we're not great all the time. I'm certainly not great, but a lot better than we were. But those are learned, skills over time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love our function. I love our discipline. I think one thing we haven't spent enough time on, at least I haven't, growing up in the world of comms and engagement and marketing, is I don't think early on, or as you're moving your way through your career, you are taught much about leadership and the value of talent. And we could talk about that in a little bit, but those are I wish I knew the old adage, right? You wish you knew so much earlier than you do now.
Yeah,
and I'm a learn by doing type of person, so I guess it would kind of come at some point, and there's obviously still more to do. But those elements, and this is what we try to talk about as a team a lot. We try to talk a lot about talent and a lot about what we're doing to develop people or put people in the right places to succeed. Because we didn't always spend a lot of time on that. I felt like throughout my career. But the 24/7 thing is real. Kind of speaks to talent, though. We move so fast, and there's so much going on. You really need to have the right people in the right places to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Gone are the days of you get a fax in from the local investigative reporter at the TV station, and they're going to want a response in 4 days, and you're running something down. It is all, as everyone knows, videoed real time.
Right.
And so it's incumbent upon having people on the team, and this is the whole team, right? Specialists, managers, senior managers, directors, managing directors, the right people in place where their judgment, right? They're tested. They're going to make the call. You trust them to make the call. Now, when there's time, or if there's hardy issues you need to run down, sure. But there's so much that happens just on a day-to-day basis, and trusting the people starts with making sure you get the right people in the right place to handle all these issues.
And that actually, I think part of the reason why I asked about the 24/7 part is just that. I mean, I think no matter what job you're in, I think we always want the right people in the right roles, and that's what leads to success. And it's not always right, and sometimes you have to make those changes, and those are hard changes. And let's actually segue to the leadership part, because I think that is important. I do want to spend a little more time on that. I mean, you mentioned like these are learned parts, and you act by doing. And I'm like you too, and I will tell you, it took me a long time to get to that point, but I am now. What I've learned is that there's never a perfect moment to do something. Sometimes you just have to do it. The best way forward is through, if you will. It doesn't mean you don't do it, in a way that's thoughtful, and you're not trying to harm people in the way. But leadership is a learned aspect, and sometimes you take some hits along the way. So as you went through these various parts of your career, maybe there's a takeaway in each part, or how did you become the lead? How would you articulate how you became the leader you are?
Yeah, and some people might not think I'm a good leader, but I'm the person I am today.
I'll speak for you.
Let's just pretend. Let's just pretend for the sake of this conversation. I think it comes to back to kind of what we talked about. I think the importance in identifying talent and giving people room to grow via the experiences. And I think I didn't I've been through many downsizings along the way. And I think for each one, it is reinforced. You better make sure you have the best people on board to do the work. And then as I think the speed of the work that we do is far greater than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that also dictates you need to make sure back to the judgment, you have the best people in the place to make the judgment. And I think then the conversations I know today with our group. So our director plus population, we call our group global engagement. We have all comms, marketing, community affairs, sponsorships, and events management. Our time, the bulk of our time is spent talking about talent and just how are we making sure we are building the next leaders. And then in the one-on-ones that I have with my direct reports, I try to spend time talking about how they're leading their teams, because if you have to build an organization, I like to say the things that you like about how you work in your likeness, so they are multiplying the work that you want to do. Because if it's all going to come through one person making the call, or decisions are made by, they're only going to do so much. And so how are you constantly thinking about your team and making sure that you have the right people in place to do the work? By at least talking about it, and look, we're not perfect at it by far, and you get derailed, there's the crisis of the day and the proactive element of the day, and you're often, trust me, you're still doing the work.
Right.
But that's why at least when we talk about it as much as we do, it hopefully stays top of mind for people, so they know making sure I have the right people and the right team to support the work we're doing is critical to success. It sounds obvious, but it's hard to do.
No,
and you're not. I don't think you are trained up that way in this discipline.
Right. And I actually don't. It may sound obvious. It doesn't mean it's easy either.
That's it.
Right. I mean, I think no matter what profession, no matter where career you choose, I think and the bigger organizations are even more difficult. And you're in one that's massive, right? So you have employees and they're all over the world and all different points in time. I think that is something, that's difficult to, understand for the normal day-to-day person who does, and I don't want to call it a 9-to-5 job, but a more career, like on-off job. And I think that's something, also to talk about a little bit about that, you're having to deal with pressure that's around the clock. Like, how are you able to regulate that? What do you do for yourself, and what would you recommend? I'm sure you talk to your team about this, right? Like, how do you? I'm pushing you into directions. Ron is too humble, people, so I'm going to actually push him into. You're very humble about this, but I know you care dearly about your team and your organization. How do you guide them on how to deal with this emotionally when things happen, like there's accidents or disasters, or you hear constant complaints? And it's just the nature of the job, and what you're getting into, so no one's saying you regret it. But how do you help your team get through that? How do you get through it?
Yeah, I think a few things here, and we're improving in this area. I'll start by saying I actually think there's an irony to the 24/7 work, in that you can leave. So just time away, or just a remote work, or you can hand off the work's always going to happen, but we got to figure out a way where you don't always have to be doing it, or you don't always have to be here, which is a huge difference, by the way. I think that's important for people with families, because I think I encourage everyone to go. You got to go to every game, every dance, every graduation, every award ceremony, every bouquet flower passing there is about anything. You need to go to. And you got to make sure that you keep room for your life and your family. The work doesn't stop, which is all links together. So you better have a team that's going to all pull together and get it done. And I think making sure people take breaks is critical. We had one year where we had mandatory vacation because people were not taking vacation. So it's stuff as simple as that. But I think it's how you interact with people in a realistic way. There are more than enough issues that we see in this industry, and being realistic to understand what we can control and what we can't control and what a good outcome. We're not looking for unrealistic outcomes.
Right.
So, engaging with people like you'd want to be engaged with, I think is critical. We don't have this solved by any means, and I'm sure there are days and weeks where certain people on our team is like, this is insanity. And but how can we on most days, most weeks, be invigorated about the work, make sure people are getting the time when they need it. Are they getting supported when they need it? And if people want to talk about things or need a break or need to raise their hand, I mean, we encourage people to do that. But for me, spending time with the family is critical, and I'm not going to miss those things. So that's the reason why I want to make sure that we have a strong team in place. Is so if I got to get to soccer game, I could do it. Now, was my phone on? Could I be taking a call? Sure. And maybe that's not a best practice for family life, but you're present and you're engaged and you're understanding, all that you're supposed to be supporting.
No, but I think that was great, and I think that that's not unusual when you reach a certain level of leadership that you're on, I wouldn't say all the time, but you're on, right? And I think that, I had another conversation I had with somebody. It's like, I think these things start to blend, you blend, it's this work. I don't really love the work-life balance concept because it all blends together. It's all life, right? And I think it all figures in one way or the other. And if you're needed, you're available. But like you made a good point about the being present. And I think, it sounds like, and your family is extraordinarily important to you. That you don't miss things there. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind. How does your family fit into this? And and you could brag a little bit about your family.
No, and it's no, absolutely. And the phrase which some people love, work-life integration is some people like it, some people hate it, but it's kind of true.
Yeah.
And I think before I get to the family, I think in this day and age too, being connected is critical. Especially in the issues crisis world that we live in, because speed is so important.
Right.
And I was, 20 years ago, when I would think about what a, senior leader is, doing, you think that they're, above it all. And that's not true. It's been, in this day and age, it's probably times 4, because sometimes the speed in making sure that you're responding or reacting or, helping to solve an issue is the most important part of managing an issue. So, and that's where the rotation of the team and figuring out who's on and who's off and how you're finding time, for sure. But no, family is, super critical. We first had 2 daughters, and when my first one was born, the church we were going to, Buckhead Church in Atlanta at the time, Pastor Andy Stanley had put out a book. It's called Choosing to Cheat. And it was basically a short little book that basically asked, when it's all over, are you going to cheat your family or are you going to cheat work? And so it was kind of like okay. And this is the time when, when I was working at Home Depot at the time, you expect to be in a 7 to 7. And that was just that's the starting point. And again, this is where I think that today's workforce being a little more mobile and you're being connected all the time and really connected, not just the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
But you're able to have a video call, you're able to engage, you're able to get a conference call together in 3 seconds and, respond to everyone immediately, gives you that ability to get places. And so that was definitely a moment. Don't get me wrong, I didn't all of a sudden say like, I'm not going to work. But I mean,
I was going to ask you for that book.
it planted the seed to then, as you move forward, family is super. And being there, you can never replace those things.
Yeah.
And have I been perfect? No, but it's always top of mind.
Yeah, that's great. That's great too. So just a couple more questions.
Yeah, sure.
And we wrap up soon. So, you've gone through a lot of different parts, all different things in your career, and all different companies, and very different from each other. You've done the agency thing. What would you say to the young communications leader today to understand what do you learn in the business that you weren't taught in the classroom, or that one class that made you go into public relations years ago? Like, what would, in this world of speed that has changed dramatically over the last 5, 10, I mean, God, it feels like it changes every day now. What would you tell this up and coming communications leader about how to approach the next, part of their career?
Yeah, I think three things. One is definitely a repeat, right? No
Yeah,
business. And when I mean business, I mean, it's twofold. It's, you don't have to be a CFO,
right,
but you need to understand finance. You need to understand supply chain. You need to understand, technology and, people team and HR processes, things like that. But it's also about getting into the business, getting out. For me, the places I've worked, it's been easier. You can go to a store, you can go to a restaurant, you can go to an
right,
airport. So you can truly see where it gets done. I think, that's critical for the discipline's sake, right? It's a world of content. And so the same adage I was told decades ago about, you're either trying to get in the paper or stay out of the paper, it holds true. It's just a different form. You're either trying to, spread content, conversation, and engagement, or
right.
stop it, depending on what it is.
Yeah, right,
And I think so long, and we sit here, our group, if you're working, it's by discipline. So if you're working network, right, I'm in charge of supporting our network planning group and all the routes we're going. We're thinking about that from all stakeholders. So we're thinking about it from media. We're thinking about it from social media. We're
right.
thinking about it internally for team members. I'm going to be in charge of going to connect with investor relations to say, hey, this is coming. This is how it's going to play. I'm going to be the liaise to government relations and say, these are the routes that are coming. Hey, one of these are new. It's in this community, could be out of a community. So you're thinking about everything content holistically and understand something might be blowing up in a social channel that could take hold in more traditional media, then that reblows up, and understanding really on the issue side too. There's a tweet a minute.
Right.
How do you get that judgment to understand what's going to take hold and what's not? So really understanding content and how that flows and shows up when you need to start it, when you need to stop it. And the last thing is so simple and so obvious, but I think it's still so important for someone starting out, someone, 30, 40 years in. It's the intangibles around, attitude, availability. Are you want to work hard, working, leaning into the tough, hard assignments. You have a phrase we like to use around the metabolism for the work. It's those
Right.
intangible elements, because at the end of the day, people need to want you to be on the team.
Yeah, that's great.
And you're going to be functionally good. You're going to understand the business, but also you got to have that right attitude and demeanor so people want you to be there. And I think
That's
that's so critical today as it was 5, 10, 20 years ago.
that I love that line. It's like it just makes you resonates with your staff too. I could see it happening. Like, I mean, you can see these things play out, and I think some of these things I'm going to steal from you, Ron. So just so you know.
There you go.
All right. So for the last question, you got to pretend you're not so humble.
Okay.
When you're done with American Airlines and you decided you're going to do the next thing and you're going to retire, what would you like your legacy to be?
Boy, you don't really,
I know I'm putting you on
I
the
don't really think
spot.
much about it. And we had the opportunity through the U.S. Travel Association. We had George Bush in for, a discussion, and he said something so great. He goes, legacy, that'll be something that's decided, 30, 40, 50 years after I'm gone. I'll let them worry about that.
Like
So not to steal that answer, but I'm kind of not concerned about that.
right,
I mean,
right.
it's the
That's a
old
good answer.
adages of people will remember you more about how you showed up outside of the work, to your family and your friends and in other places. So, I'm not trying to dodge the question per
no,
se,
it's a
but
great. It's that the answer is that's exactly.
that's kind of the answer, because this is only kind of a portion of, what you do, and
Yeah.
we just show up and, try our best and try to create a good environment and deliver some results and, go home happy.
No, I love that. Well, thank you again for the time today. This was excellent. Hopefully, I will see you soon.
That's
Actually,
right.
I think I'll see you in a couple of months.
Okay, great.
Again, this is Ron DeFeo. Ron is the Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for American Airlines. Thanks again, Ron. Hope you all enjoyed this. This is a great conversation. And we'll see you next time on Keep Going.